everybody.
Hello.
Hello to the large audience. Thanks a lot for being there today at lunchtime. We wanted to talk today a little bit about marine coordination together with Graham. So, I'm Olivier Chatelot. I'm project manager within the company Valemo. I'm fully dedicated to offshore wind, Valemo being a company specialized in operation and maintenance for renewable energies.
And I'm Graham Howe. I'm the sales manager for SEAROC, and we supply marine coordination software and communications for far offshore projects.
So we've decided to put our skills together in order to build a solution for marine coordination. So first, maybe we wanted to share a little bit of our knowledge about marine coordination and what is marine coordination, because it appears often that this word is a bit unclear for people. So maybe we can start on that, introducing the topic.
Yeah, thank you. A little bit of our background. We have worked on 40 offshore projects around the world, including 12 of which we supplied the far offshore communications. And we're currently operating on about 50% of the offshore wind turbines operating today. So we've got framework agreements with Ørsted, Vattenfall, and we're working with Northland's projects in the German Bight. So basically what we've got is we have a lot of experience in the topic of marine coordination and the management of risk in offshore wind projects. So do you want me to talk a little bit more about that?
For sure, yeah.
Okay, so what we're looking at when we're talking about the management of risk in offshore wind projects, it was phrased very nicely by a colleague of mine at our sister company Natural Power, who said, we all know how to build a wind farm. The only problem is when you're building a wind farm offshore, what you've got is this big blue wobbly thing in the middle that does unpredictable things, and you can't actually be sure what's going to happen next. So really what we're about in working in marine coordination offshore is how do we deal with the fact that we've got a significantly higher level of risk caused by the fact that you're working offshore. So I'll go into a little bit more detail on that and to give you some sort of sense of what we've got. So if you look at, for example, the Merkur project, which has just been going through its commissioning phase now in the German Bight, they actually, in the first 4 months of this year, had 45,000 crew transitions during the commissioning phase of the project. So this is something that the French market isn't fully aware of yet, so let me give you a sense of what we're talking about by a transition. By transition, we mean somebody got from the shore onto a vessel, and then off a vessel and got onto a wind turbine. So in case you aren't aware of this, if your sea state is higher than a 1.5 meter significant wave, you're not getting off that crew vessel and getting onto a wind turbine because it's just too dangerous.
And typically, what kind of risks do you encounter in these situations?
Okay, so a lot of people here will know things about CTVs, they'll know about crew transfer vessels and walk-to-work systems, and it all sounds relatively easy. But basically, what you're asking a technician to do is take all of his equipment and basically, effectively, make a small jump or a large jump that gets them onto a turbine. Because they're going to have to get through to the crew access ladder. They're going to then have to climb up that turbine and commission the turbine in a nacelle at about 100 meters. So really, there are many degrees of complexity, and a lot of very clever people are working on the walk-to-work system, so basically the guys are not making any kind of leap whatsoever. But the bottom line is, you have a limited window during the course of a year in which you're going to be building your wind farm offshore. And it's basically, in Europe, you're kind of starting somewhere about February, March, and then you're going out to October. Jack-up vessels being what they are, and we know that jack-up vessels, you're looking at several €100,000. You're talking at CTVs at 50 to 100,000 euros, maybe the rentals on a CTV. You're going to want to keep those assets working as long as possible. So if your weather forecaster says that the waves are going to be under 1.5 meters, you kind of want your technicians to go out there and get on that wind turbine. And there is an element of risk engaged in doing that piece of work.
Okay, and is it only for the technicians themselves, or are there other people involved in that process and subject to these risks?
Okay, so I'll run over again. 45,000 transitions in 4 months for the Merkur project. So those 45,000 transitions, what's that actually mean? So to give you some idea, to energize a cable on an offshore wind turbine requires 5 separate visits by 5 separate technical teams doing various things during the stage of it. Some of those people might just be delivering the equipment for the team to follow up the next day. Some of those people are actually in the very high risk area of a high voltage cable connection. So there's a lot of complex parts, and I kind of talk about, if anybody ever watched Star Trek, we're talking about playing, 3-dimensional chess here. That you've got a lot of moving parts that are basically requiring you to do very dangerous things lots of times on lots of turbines. So the French farms are going to be 70 to 80 turbines. So just think, just to commission the cable on those, you're going to have 5 visits 70 to 80 times.
Okay, and so how can we manage such a level of risks on the project?
Okay, so if you think what you're doing on an onshore wind farm is basically somebody's getting in his truck, driving up to the turbine, climbing on the turbine and doing the work. There's still an element of risk in doing that, but basically it's a very low risk. I mean, there have been people who've had heart attacks on remote wind farms. What we're talking about here is somebody who, firstly, what you've got to do is say, right, are they qualified to go offshore? So you take your technician and say, is he qualified to do high voltage work? That's fine. But now we've got to add in, does he have GWO safety standards offshore? Is he qualified to go offshore? Has that guy actually shown any experience in going offshore? Because if he's on a 1.3 meter sea state on a crew transfer vessel, the likelihood is he will bring up his breakfast and you'll be seeing it again. So there's a whole load of details that come with working offshore that you don't normally see working onshore. So basically the first thing the marine coordinator has to do is say, right, is that person actually qualified to be doing the work they're doing? And that includes, are they qualified to get on and off a vessel? You can't just put somebody in there and say, right, okay, today you're going to get on this boat, and at the other end you're then going to get out in a 1.5 meter wave and climb a ladder to go offshore. So the marine coordinators have to be accountable for checking that people are qualified, checking that they're suitably inducted, that they understand the safety situation, and that they possess the necessary PPE and equipment to be able to go and do the work. Typically what we find, that's done during the setup phase of a project. So to give you a sense, some of the jack-up barges that we work with have times on a cruise shift where they're basically inducting about 100 to 150 personnel. So those people will have to be checked to make sure they're qualified. On the Racebank project, we dealt with approximately 5,000 technical personnel during the construction phase of the project. And we have a database of 24,000 crew.
And does that mean that the marine coordinator is only involved before the operation takes place?
They start work before the operation. They will then manifest the crew that are going out the next day and check that those people are qualified to actually go out there and work. So that's the first thing to do, is, are the right people doing the right job offshore? The second thing you've got to do is make sure that they're actually getting on the right vessel at the right time. With the cost of offshore crew vessels, basically, if you don't send the people out on the right vessel, you've wasted your vessel for that day. You have to manifest it. You have to make sure that that vessel is going to be able to go out in the sea state that it's supposed to go out into, and that people will then be able to get on and off that vessel. So there's a whole degree of complexity, and that's before they even start going out and doing it during the day. So the next thing that happens is your marine coordinators. I always like to say that a lead marine coordinator is effectively the air traffic controller for the project. So what they're doing is they're making sure that people have got on the right vessel, and then when they get off the vessel, that they've got off the vessel in the right place. So if you look at our software, the way we handle it, you'll see a little red dot and there'll be a number beside it, and that will tell you who's on the turbine. That means that the marine coordinators will have to speak to the vessel master, they'll have to have the right radio comms, and you'll have to know where everybody is. Partially that's for health and safety. Well, it's almost entirely health and safety, and some of it is the operational side of things. But if I give you a sense of this, I was at one project where a foundation was lowered onto a guy's hand. The marine coordinator had him in a helicopter in a German hospital inside 30 minutes, and they saved his fingers. So if you think about it,
quite fast. Yeah,
it was a stunning piece of work, and I think the guy's very grateful that he still has the use of all of his hand. But if you can imagine that you've got a technician who's in a nacelle, they're 100 meters up, and they have a heart attack. You want to know who they're there, you want to know who's got health and safety, who's got the first aid that can actually get to that guy and effectively save his life by the time that the helicopters turned up and actually got him off that turbine.
But hearing what you say, that's a lot of responsibilities for the Marine Coordinator. But how does the Marine Coordinator manage such a lot of things?
Okay, that's a good point, and particularly the problem that we're going to be facing in France is that you're going to want French Marine coordinators, who are it's kind of a chicken and the egg situation. You don't get Marine coordinators till you start building projects, and they don't exist yet. So really what you're looking at with your Marine coordinators, we found effectively that what you're picking up is, so for the US, for example, retired Coast Guards are the classic example. So they're people who've worked in the environment, they are familiar with the waters, they're used to dealing with high risk, high pressure situations. Strangely enough, in the UK, a lot of the earlier Marine coordinators were ex-fishermen, because they were around and they were available. We don't know quite how it's going to work in France yet, but one of the reasons why we partnered with Valemo is the experience that they have in doing the offshore work. They've been working on the mast already at FECOMP, so they're familiar with the scenario, and you know how to get people on and offshore. Now it's a question of the scale that's going up. So the next thing that we'll be doing is we'll be conducting the training program. And what is absolutely essential is the procedures that are going to bring into play, because it's the usual challenge when you build with a challenge this size. How do you deal with it? It's like eating an elephant. You do it one bite at a time, and what you have to do is break it down into the steps so that you know where people are going, are they qualified to go there, and what are they doing when they're on the site. So one of the biggest issues that you've got is the work on simultaneous operations, for example, when you've got 4 or 5 different companies that want to go out there and do the work on that particular location on the same day. So what we have is our software supports the identification of simultaneous operations, because no matter how hard you try, when you've got 5,000 people on 300 vessels going back and forth, somebody will try and get on the same turbine at the same time. So what we do is at the manifesting and the permitting stage, we identify when more than one person wants to do the same work on the same turbine. And then the important thing for the Marine Coordinator is to be the diplomat that explains to, let me just say, Prismian, that the cabling isn't being done because somebody else is doing a critical piece of painting work that can't get done at any other time. So basically your Marine Coordinator has to be a kind of air traffic controller with diplomacy, who then on the day has to turn around and say to that fishing vessel that's in the middle of coming into the farm, I really wouldn't go there if I were you, because that will be very dangerous. So that's kind of what you're asking for a Marine Coordinator to do.
So we will have a specific training for diplomacy as well.
Oh, there's absolutely no question about it. So what we're looking to do for the French market is to bring the experience we have in the Dutch, the German and the UK markets into the French market. And the other situation that you have to understand is the French will do this differently. There will be different French standards that apply that do not apply in other parts of the world. There will be different diplomatic requirements. We know that the French fishermen, for example, have a very large say in what occurs on the French farms. So you're going to have to diplomatically deal with them. Your port processes will be different. We're finding this, for example, in Taiwan. We've already identified that the Taiwanese officials in the port are used to giving permission to anybody going offshore in that day. So basically you have to get the port officials to sign off and approve that somebody's going out. There will be different things, and we won't know until we get rolling in France really what is different.
Sure, French people will always do differently, I'm not sure.
And better, obviously, because it's French.
Sure, that's obvious. And can you maybe tell us where the Marine Coordinator will work on during the project? Will he be on the vessel, on the substation maybe? I don't know.
The answer to that one is very interesting because it's all of the above. Basically what we're seeing is the evolution from the early days of marine coordination, when you had fishermen and people with their experience in the industry. What you're seeing now is when you get to, for example, Ørsted, who are simply the best at what they do. They now have 12 dedicated marine coordination personnel working out of 2 offices in Grimsby in the UK. They have a clear training program and career path and progression, and they run all their projects from Grimsby in the UK, but they have 1 or 2 people on the ground at the project, typically in a Marine Coordination office. Northland do the same thing. They run things out of a centre in Hamburg. Whereas other projects are accustomed to having the Marine Coordination work in an office, actually at the site. So that works during the construction phase, but once you get into operations, when you're down to 1 vessel a day, what you're really about is the economies of scale. So a lot of money gets spent during the construction phase because that's a one-off 1-year period of high risk. Then everybody wants to save money and not spend a lot of money during the operations phase. So that stage is when you tend to see the centralised Marine Coordination offices coming. And obviously you're in a situation where EDF and Engie are thinking very clearly about where they want to go in the future, and where it makes logistical sense for them to have an office. For example, you don't put an operational Marine Coordination office in Paris, in La Défense, because it's going to cost a fortune. So the question is, where's the location that you're going to be able to put that Marine Coordination office and get the economies of scale, and be able to work it from there. But with our software, for example, which is software as a service, you can effectively run it from anywhere. So the Marine Coordination in one project in Taiwan is split between Taichung Port and Yorkshire in the UK. Okay. And you can get 24/7 coverage that way. So what you'll see is the continual evolution of this program. Things such as the Valorem control center that you have in Bordeaux.
Yeah, we're in Bordeaux, yeah.
Yeah, would be a perfect scenario where you can centralize the administration there and have 1 or 2 key personnel in the port. And that's the way we're seeing the evolution working now.
And Bordeaux is still cheaper than Paris.
And the wine's better. Yes, so you find yourself in a situation where you say, right, okay, people think there's a lot of money in offshore wind, and they look at billion-euro projects and think there's a lot of money to go around. At the end of the day, what we're looking at is the operational projects are still on very tight margins, and what you're going to want to do is make sure that you get economies of scale, which is what Ørsted are doing now. And where they lead, everybody sooner or later will follow. We have developments in radio communications. For example, the Belgian farms are a marvellous example of this. You can get Wi-Fi connection right the way across the Belgian farms. And what we see is the evolution of local hubs where the infrastructure and the substations, such as the work that RTE are doing here on Dunkirk, for example, when it is awarded, you'll be able to create a Wi-Fi network which will bring down the cost of the communications and means that you will be able to talk to anywhere in the world from the offshore wind farm. And that's where we see the evolution happening.
One thing, if I understood well what you've said, mine coordination is supposed to take place during the whole construction phase and also during the whole operation phase. Does that mean that it would be continuous during the whole project? Might it be interrupted? Might it be stopped at one stage?
The challenge that you have is the disconnect that frequently happens on projects, and it was said as a joke, but it's fairly true. One project I was at, so I was going from an unnamed European city down to the local port, and as I went, the project manager said, just tell the project team, the operations team, we're throwing the keys over the fence next week, and it's their problem. Now, he was joking, and they had a very good handover there, but what you typically see is the construction team are not always the operations team. And what the developers are beginning to get now is that sense of, yes, this is a 25-year problem. So you're beginning to see the handover between the teams, and some developers do this better than other developers. Certainly all the French developers I've spoken to have learned that lesson, have watched what happens, and are basically saying, right, we want radio communications for 25 years, we want marine coordination to cover 25 years. There's still some shifting between teams that create issues, but I think one of the biggest lessons learned now is developers are going to be thinking in 25, 30-year terms. So we're seeing less of that. And whenever we're speaking to people about tendering, we are making sure that they are giving pricing to manage that whole 25-year period. To give you an idea as well, the cost of marine coordination will drop by at least 50%, if not 75%, between construction and operations, because you just don't do as much work.
Okay. Thanks for for sharing all this experience. To be honest, I've not prepared actually a detailed conclusion for the pitch, but maybe before concluding, the large audience may have some questions to us. If so, do not hesitate.
When I say a 1.5 metre sea state is absolutely the critical cut-off point for operations and cost savings on a project, the accuracy and reliability of your weather forecasts is essential for the profitability of any project that you're working on. And it's the important thing to say is the marine coordinator can't stop people going offshore if the vessel master and the project are absolutely adamant that somebody is going offshore. Basically, the marine coordinator, at the end of the day, has to defer to the vessel master and what the vessel master considers to be safe. So I'll just pick up on that one, which is pretty much everybody that we work with follow the kind of DMV standards of recommended 2 forecasts. And I want to make a plea for the accuracy of weather forecasts and the need to have a reliable forecaster which has got a good track record of working in the waters they're working with, and B, the second point for, and it's a long-term plea of mine, to have an on-site data reference such as a Wavebuoy that can actually then feed into the forecasting. I love it when my phone works, don't you? And actually make sure that you can increase the accuracy of the forecast going forward. So again, we want to stress, when you're working in operations offshore, the critical factor is always health and safety, which then follows through to efficiency, that follows through to the profitability. If you don't have a balance between health and safety and efficiency, you will not have a profitable project and you won't have a safe project. So, and I'll reinforce again, Ørsted, being the market leaders on this, have a 0 tolerance for workplace injury. Absolutely none at all. And the element that comes from that is getting your marine coordinators having the sufficient data, the weather data, and understanding a good relationship with the vessel master to bring through everything so that you get a solidly coordinated, safe project. And I think that's what I've got to say on that one.
It's good to know. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Graham. Thanks a lot for listening to us. As Graham said, that's a 25-year challenge that we have to tackle and that we have to decide to manage together, SEAROC and Valemo, in order to get prepared for the lot of new offshore wind projects coming in France in the coming years, hopefully. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.